This story is titled, My Fiancée Told Her Boss I Was Just a Taxi Driver at the Corporate Event I Sponsored, so I disappeared, canceled all payments, started dating her best friend, and now she watches our success while begging me to come back. Hey everyone, I'm Tyler, 30 years old, and I never thought I'd be the type of guy posting relationship drama online. But this situation has been eating me up for months now, and I need to get it off my chest. Fair warning, this is going to be a long story, but I think it's worth telling. I was with my girlfriend Victoria for just over 4 years. We first met back in 2019 at a charity event for kids with cancer. I was there donating some of the proceeds from my construction business, while she was handling all the PR and marketing for the entire event. My first impression of her was that she was an absolute knockout, the kind of woman who could turn every head in the room just by walking through the door. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that caught my attention. She had this incredible presence when she spoke, this confidence and articulation that commanded respect. And her laugh, God, her laugh could make you feel like you were the funniest person alive when you managed to cause it. Let me tell you a bit about myself so you understand where I'm coming from. I own a mid-sized construction company that I built from absolutely nothing. 9 years ago, I started with just one beat-up pickup truck, working 18-hour days and literally sleeping in the cab to save money on rent. Now I've got a crew of 14 people and 18 total employees. I don't have a college degree, but I built this business through pure determination and hard work. These days, I make solid money. Not fuck you money, but comfortable enough that I can take nice vacations and never worry about paying bills. I've always been a work hard, play hard kind of guy, and I value loyalty above pretty much everything else in life. Victoria worked as a PR manager at this big corporate firm in Midtown. She had a master's degree from some fancy school, an impressive job title, the whole corporate package. She always dressed like she'd stepped straight out of a magazine, never a hair out of place, always perfectly put together. When we started dating, I honestly thought I'd hit the jackpot. Here was this beautiful, ambitious woman who seemed to genuinely appreciate how hard I worked for everything I had. The first couple of years together were pretty great, honestly. I'm a simple guy with simple needs, good food, good company, and someone who can appreciate the little things in life. I'd surprise her with weekend trips to the coast, always remembered her favorite perfume brand, and did all that classic romantic stuff that my mother raised me to do. My philosophy has always been simple. Treat your woman like gold, and she'll treat you like a king. That's what my mom taught me, and I believed in it completely. Victoria absolutely loved receiving gifts, designer purses, expensive jewelry, fancy dinners at those upscale restaurants where they don't even bother putting prices on the menu. And I was more than happy to provide all of that for her. When she had a rough day at work, I'd show up with her favorite Chinese takeout and a new pair of earrings to cheer her up. When she needed a new laptop, I bought her the top-of-the-line MacBook without even blinking at the price. When her car broke down, I covered the entire repair bill without hesitation. That's just who I am. I take care of the people I love. Sometimes Victoria's friend Sophie would be around when I dropped things off at her place. Sophie was a teacher, a quiet type who always seemed genuinely grateful when I'd bring Victoria gifts or help out with something. She'd always thank me, even when Victoria didn't bother to, and she'd offer me coffee or ask how work was going before disappearing into whatever room Victoria had her waiting in. She seemed nice enough, but honestly, she just didn't stand out much next to Victoria's big, dynamic energy. Looking back now, there were warning signs that I completely missed at the time. In the beginning of our relationship, Victoria would regularly post couple pictures of us on her Instagram cute shots from our dates, vacation photos where we looked happy together. But over time, those couple photos gradually became just solo shots of her from the same vacations that I was paying for. She'd post beautiful pictures of herself at the beach resort or fancy restaurant, but somehow I was never in the frame anymore. Then, there was how she handled introductions in different social circles. She'd happily introduce me to her college friends, the people she'd known for years who remembered her before she climbed the corporate ladder. But when it came to her work colleagues, those introductions never seemed to happen. I started noticing this pattern, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it at the time. Another red flag was how she'd behave when we went out to dinner with my buddies and their wives. These were good people, hard-working, down-to-earth folks who'd become successful in their own right. But Victoria would spend half the evening on her phone, clearly bored and disengaged from the conversations happening around her. I'd try to include her, but she always seemed like she was just counting the minutes until we could leave. I remember one particular evening that should have been a wake-up call. We were at this fancy steakhouse having dinner with my main client, a guy who gives me about 45% of my business. He's a great man, a real salt-of-the-earth type who started his own manufacturing company in his garage and built it into something impressive. During dinner, he was telling this entertaining story about a fishing trip with his sons, really getting into the details about the fish they caught and how they cleaned them. I noticed Victoria texting under the table with this little smirk on her face, clearly not paying attention to our dinner conversation. Later that evening, I happened to see a text exchange on her phone from her friend. Her friend had asked, "How's dinner with the rednecks?" And Victoria had replied, "Kill me now. Dave's client just spent 25 minutes talking about gutting a fish." I confronted her about it during the car ride home, and she immediately got defensive. "It was gross, Tyler, and you just sat there laughing like it was the funniest thing you'd ever heard," she said, rolling her eyes at me. I reminded her that this man's business pays for half the rent in our apartment, but she wasn't having it. "God, you're so sensitive," she shot back. "It was just a text to Diana, not like I said it to his face or anything." I decided to let it go. You have to pick your battles in a relationship, right? But looking back now, that was the exact moment I should have seen who she really was underneath all that polished exterior. But the biggest red flag of all was something that took me way too long to recognize. In our entire 4 years together, Victoria never once brought me to any company event. Not the Christmas parties, not the summer picnics, not the charity galas, not even the casual networking events. She always had perfectly reasonable excuses. "It's just going to be boring shop talk," or "It's only for employees, you wouldn't know anyone there," or "The tickets are limited this year," or "It's really just a networking event, you'd be bored to tears." I believed every single excuse because, well, why wouldn't I? She was my girlfriend, and I trusted her completely. When you love someone, you give them the benefit of the doubt, even when your gut is screaming at you that something isn't right. I had no reason to think she was lying to me about something so basic. 3 months ago, everything came to a head when Victoria got promoted to senior PR director. This was a huge deal for her, a fat raise with about a $35,000 bump plus stock options. She was absolutely over the moon about it, talking about the promotion nonstop for weeks. Her company was throwing this fancy celebration dinner at some upscale steakhouse to honor her and a couple of other executives who had gotten promoted at the same time. "Babe, can you believe it? All those years of ass-kissing finally paid off," she laughed while trying on different dresses in our bedroom, holding each one up to herself in the mirror. "This opens up so many doors for me. I'm definitely on the VP track now for sure." "That's awesome, babe. I'm really proud of you," I told her, and I genuinely meant it. Despite all the issues we'd been having, I truly wanted her to succeed and be happy in her career. "When's the dinner?" I asked. "Should I rent a tux, or will my navy suit work fine for something like this?" That's when I saw it. This look crossed her face. Not quite an eye roll, but close. It was one of those micro expressions where someone's true feelings flash across their face for just a split second before they can hide it behind their practiced smile. What I saw in that moment was pure contempt. "Oh, it's just for the executive team and their spouses," she said with that perfectly practiced PR voice. "You know how corporate politics work." I nodded, but something about her response felt off to me. "Wait, their spouses can come, but I can't. That doesn't make sense." "Well, their spouses are, they're all part of that world," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Lawyers, doctors, finance people, they all move in the same circles." She didn't need to finish that thought. I understood exactly what she was implying. "Not construction workers. I own a construction company," I corrected her, feeling that familiar burn starting in my chest. "I'm not out there swinging hammers myself anymore. I'm running the whole operation." "I know, babe, and I'm so proud of what you've built," she said, that PR smile firmly plastered in place. "It's just that these people are different." They'd spend the whole evening talking about their summer homes in the Hamptons and their kids' private schools. "You'd be bored to tears, trust me. I'm actually saving you from a miserable evening." I decided to let it go. Once again, picking my battles. But over the next 3 weeks, she wouldn't stop talking about this dinner. It was the biggest night of her career. Everything needed to be absolutely perfect. Her boss was flying in from the West Coast specifically to be there. The way she talked about it, you'd think she was attending the Oscars. Then came the requests for money. First, she needed a new outfit. Something classy but bold that would make the right impression. That ran me a few $100s. Then came the shoes, designer of course, because everyone will notice if they don't match the caliber of the event. She claimed they were on sale, but I saw the receipt. Next was the professional hair and makeup appointment, because everyone's getting professionally styled for photos. Finally, she hit me with a request that really caught me off guard. She needed help covering the cost of the dinner reservation, around $600. She framed it as a small contribution because the company was paying for most of it, but the people getting promoted were expected to pitch in as a show of appreciation. "It's like showing gratitude," she explained when she saw my confused expression. "Like I'm acknowledging the investment they're making in me and my future." I wrote every single check without complaint. That's what partners do. They support each other through important moments. Plus, I was genuinely happy for her success. I remembered how validating it felt when I landed my first big contract, and I wanted her to have her moment to shine. The night before the dinner, Victoria was a bundle of nerves. She tried on her outfit for what had to be the 12th time, adjusting everything obsessively and checking herself from every possible angle in our bedroom mirror. That outfit probably cost more than my first truck payment, but I had to admit she looked incredible in it. "You look amazing," I told her honestly. "They're going to be absolutely blown away." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something distant about her expression. "Thanks. I just need everything to be perfect tomorrow night. They're bringing in the CEO from headquarters, and if I make a really good impression on him, it could fast-track me straight to the executive committee." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was bothering me, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. Around 2 a.m., I got up to get some water from the kitchen. As I passed the bathroom, I could hear Victoria talking on the phone in that hushed voice people use when they don't want to be overheard. "No, he's fine with it. He doesn't even know where the restaurant is," I heard her say quietly. "Trust me, it's better this way. The last thing I need is him talking about concrete pours while I'm trying to impress the CFO." There was a pause, then she continued, "I know, right? Can you imagine? This is my boyfriend. He's like a real-life Bob the Builder." Then she laughed, that same laugh that had gotten me completely hooked 4 years ago. But now it was aimed directly at me, mocking me to whoever was on the other end of that phone call. I quickly made my way back to bed and pretended to be asleep when she came back to the room. But I laid there for hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying every single moment of our relationship. I found myself wondering how many other times she'd laughed at me behind my back, how many conversations she'd had with her friends where I was the punchline. By morning, I was done playing along. I wasn't angry, I was just crystal clear about what needed to happen. I wasn't going to argue with her, beg her for respect, or give her another dollar. Instead, I was going to remind her exactly who I was without raising my voice even once. But more than that, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wanted to see what these company events she always excluded me from were really like. I wanted to see her in her natural habitat, so to speak, and understand the world she was so desperate to protect me from. So I did a little detective work. I found the restaurant online. This place called Sterling's, where they age their steaks for 45 days, and you need a reservation a month in advance just to get in the door. I called them up, pretending to be confirming some details about the corporate reservation. The hostess was happy to help, and I got everything I needed. The time, the private room name, even how many people would be attending. It was surprisingly easy. That evening, Victoria left at 7 p.m., all dolled up and looking like $1,000,000. She kissed me goodbye at the door and said, "Don't wait up for me, babe. It'll probably go pretty late, and there might be drinks afterward at someone's place." I waited exactly 1 hour after she left. Then I took the longest, most careful shower of my life, trimmed my beard to absolute perfection, and put on my best suit. The same one I wear when I'm signing major contracts. I added my grandfather's vintage watch, the one he gave me when I started my business. Then I drove to Midtown, parked about a block away from the restaurant, and walked into this place where the steaks cost more than my first truck payment. I didn't sneak in or try to hide what I was doing. I walked right up to the hostess with my shoulders back and made direct eye contact. I gave her a firm handshake and told her I was joining the corporate party, but was running a little late due to a work emergency. She led me right to their private dining area without asking a single question. Guess I can clean up pretty nice when I want to. I didn't march into that private dining room and make some dramatic scene. Instead, I took a seat at the bar area that had perfect sightlines into their private dining room, ordered a whiskey sour, and just watched. What I saw was Victoria completely in her element, and it was honestly fascinating to observe. She was working the room like a seasoned politician, laughing at all the right moments, touching people's arms when they spoke to emphasize her engagement, doing that social butterfly thing that she was so naturally gifted at. I counted 22 people total, all dressed in expensive clothes and carrying themselves with that particular confidence that comes from corporate success. Her boss was this older gentleman with distinguished silver hair who kept parading Victoria around the room like she was his prize protege. He'd introduce her to different groups, his hand on her shoulder, clearly proud of her promotion and excited to show her off to the other executives. What struck me most was how completely different she seemed in this environment. Back home, Victoria was often tired and drained. She'd complain constantly about work, about her colleagues, about the pressure and politics of corporate life. But here, watching her from across the room, she was absolutely energized. Her eyes were bright and alert, and she was gesturing animatedly as she told some story that had everyone at her table laughing and hanging on her every word. About an hour into my observation, this younger guy in a sharp blue suit came up to the bar to order drinks for his table. He noticed me watching the dining room and struck up a conversation. "You with the corporate group?" he asked in a friendly tone, clearly assuming I belonged to their world. "Sort of," I replied carefully. "My girlfriend's in there, Victoria." His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Victoria? Victoria the marketing wizard? You're dating Victoria?" I nodded, taking a sip of my whiskey sour. 4 years now. That's wild, man. She never mentioned having a boyfriend. He caught himself immediately, realizing how that might sound. I mean, congratulations on her promotion. She really deserves it. Thanks, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Mind if I ask what she's like at work? She doesn't really talk about the day-to-day stuff much at home. The guy, who introduced himself as Tom, got more talkative after a couple of drinks. He told me that Victoria was basically a shark in heels, ambitious cutthroat, always working different angles to climb higher up the corporate ladder. But she was respected for her results. Definitely respected. She's basically the reason we landed the Morrison account, Tom explained, clearly impressed. Worked 85-hour weeks for 2 months straight, completely outmaneuvered our competitors at every turn. The boss absolutely loves her work ethic. Does she work closely with the team? I asked, trying to sound casually interested. Make friends around the office? He shrugged. She's pretty selective with her time, you know? Doesn't really do the casual happy hour thing unless there are higher-ups there who might advance her career. Then he grinned and added, though there was that Christmas party last year. Man, your girl can really dance when she wants to. Christmas party. The same one she'd told me was canceled due to budget cuts. You should come meet everyone, Tom suggested enthusiastically. They'd love to meet Victoria's boyfriend. She's always been so private about her personal life that we've all been curious. Before I could figure out how to respond, he was already leading me toward their private dining room. We walked in together, and heads turned as people noticed the newcomer. Victoria was in the middle of laughing at something one of the women was saying when she spotted me across the room. The smile dropped from her face like it was made of stone. Tyler, she said, and my name sounded completely foreign coming out of her mouth, like she'd never said it before in her life. Tom, oblivious to the tension radiating from Victoria, slapped my shoulder in a friendly gesture. Found your boyfriend at the bar! I can't believe you've been hiding him from us for 4 whole years! The awkward silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I could see Victoria's mind racing, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected situation. Then she recovered, plastering that familiar PR smile back across her face like she was flipping a switch. Oh no, there's been a misunderstanding, she laughed, and her voice had this high-pitched quality that I'd never heard before. Tyler's not my boyfriend. I kept my face completely neutral, waiting to see where she was going with this. Part of me was still hoping, praying really, that she'd correct herself, introduce me properly as her partner, give me some basic dignity in front of her colleagues. He's just my driver for tonight, she continued without missing a beat. My car is in the shop. I literally froze. Driver. Not boyfriend, not partner, not even friend. Just the guy who drove her there. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was wearing the same cufflinks she'd given me 3 Christmases ago, engraved with, "To my rock." And there I was, suddenly reduced to nothing more than her chauffeur. That moment broke something inside me that I didn't even realize I'd been holding on to. Tom looked confused, glancing between Victoria and me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite make sense. Tyler likes to joke around, Victoria said quickly, cutting off whatever Tom was about to say. Don't you, Tyler? As I stood there processing what had just happened, still maintaining my composure, she leaned in real close to me. That fake PR smile was still plastered on her face, but her voice was low and venomous when she whispered just loud enough for me to hear. You should be grateful I even let you in here. That was it. That was the exact moment the switch flipped for me. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was her telling me straight to my face that I was beneath her, that I was nothing. After everything I had given, everything I had paid for, everything I had stood by her through, this was her takeaway. That I should be grateful for scraps. Everyone in that room was staring at us now. The silver-haired boss, the woman Victoria had been laughing with moments before. All these strangers in their expensive clothes looking at me like I was some random weirdo who had crashed their exclusive party. I had two choices in that moment. I could blow everything up, cause a scene, and give Victoria the drama she was probably expecting. Or I could walk out like a man who doesn't beg for respect, who knows his own worth regardless of what anyone else thinks. I chose the second option. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice calm as hell, and said, "Truck's waiting out front when you're done." She blinked like I had just snatched the script right out of her hands. She clearly wasn't expecting me to play along with her charade. Then I turned to address the room, gave a polite nod to everyone watching, and added, "Congratulations on the promotions. Enjoy the rest of your evening." I walked out of that private dining room with my head held high, finished my whiskey sour at the bar, left a tip that probably outclassed half the people in that room, and drove away with absolutely zero regrets. On the drive home, I called my buddy Marcus. "Hey man, can I crash at your place tonight?" "Everything all right?" he asked, hearing something in my voice. "Not really. I'll tell you everything when I get there." I went back to our apartment, packed a bag with just the essentials, and left Victoria's key on the kitchen counter along with a simple note. Found my own ride home, staying at Marcus's for a few days. We need to talk, but not tonight. Then I drove straight to Marcus's place, crashed on his couch, and told him the entire story from beginning to end. Marcus is a good dude. He just listened without judgment, didn't try to give me advice I wasn't ready to hear, and offered me his guest room for as long as I needed it. The first thing I did after dropping my bag in his guest room was calling my bank and canceling every single card that Victoria had access to. The shared credit cards, the joint accounts, everything. Next came all the subscriptions. Netflix Family Plan went down to a party of one. Her car insurance that I'd been paying got cut off. Every streaming service, every monthly payment that had my name on it, but benefited her. I wasn't just walking away from this relationship. I was methodically deleting every financial thread that tied us together. Victoria started blowing up my phone almost immediately. Call after call, voicemail after voicemail, each message more desperate than the last. I actually read a few of the texts that came through. "Where are you? Call me right now." "Are you seriously this upset over a stupid joke?" "I'm sorry, okay? Please just talk to me." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I turned my phone completely off and got the first decent night's sleep I'd had in months. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through Marcus's guest room window and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. His wife Jennifer had made breakfast for everyone, and she didn't ask any probing questions. She just squeezed my shoulder and said, "Eat up. Everything's better with a full stomach." After breakfast, I finally turned my phone back on to find 18 more missed calls from Victoria and 4 calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably her friends trying to reach me on her behalf. I sent her one simple text. "I'm fine. Staying at Marcus's. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't come here." Then I spent the rest of the day helping Marcus work on his project car, this beautiful 1969 Camaro he's been restoring for about 4 years now. It was exactly the kind of mindless, mechanical work I needed. Just me, some tools, and a clear problem to solve with my hands. But Victoria showed up anyway, completely ignoring my request to stay away. Marcus answered the door when she knocked, and I could hear her putting on that polished PR voice even from the garage. "Is Tyler here?" she asked, her tone perfectly controlled. "I've been so worried about him." "He doesn't want to see you right now," Marcus said firmly, not budging from the doorway. "I just want to explain what happened," she persisted. "There's been a huge misunderstanding." "He said he'll talk to you tomorrow," Marcus repeated, his voice getting a little harder. Then he closed the door. I could hear her yelling outside for a few minutes, her voice getting more shrill and desperate, before finally hearing the sound of tires squealing as she drove off in frustration. The next day, I went back to our apartment around noon, knowing Victoria would be at work. I grabbed more clothes, my laptop, and all my important documents, birth certificate, business paperwork, anything that mattered. I left her another note with a specific time and place to meet. A coffee shop near our apartment building, somewhere public and neutral where we could talk without the drama getting out of hand. Victoria was already waiting at the coffee shop when I arrived the next day. Despite everything that had happened, her makeup was still perfect, though I could see the red rims around her eyes that suggested she'd been crying. She stood up immediately when she saw me walk through the door and tried to give me a hug. I stepped back, keeping my distance. "Tyler, thank God! I've been going absolutely crazy worrying about you," she said, her voice full of relief and desperation. I sat down across from her at the small table. "Let's skip the drama, Victoria. 4 years together, and I'm just your driver?" "It was a stupid joke," she said quickly, leaning forward. I panicked when Tom caught me off guard like that. I didn't know what to say. "You weren't caught off guard," I replied calmly. "You were ashamed of me. Have been for a long time, actually." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes told a completely different story. I leaned back in my chair and started listing the evidence. "Christmas party. The one you told me was canceled. The charity gala in April that you said was employees only. That guy Tom mentioned bringing his girlfriend to the company picnic, where spouses were specifically invited, that you conveniently forgot to tell me about." She looked cornered, scrambling for explanations. "Those events really aren't as fun as they sound, Tyler. You would have been bored." "Drop it," I cut her off. "I heard the phone call the night before your dinner." Her face went completely pale. "Last thing I need is him talking about concrete pours while I'm trying to impress the CFO. Ring any bells?" Victoria's shoulders sagged as she realized I'd heard everything. I was stressed out of my mind. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. "You meant every word of it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And here's the thing. It's not even about you being ashamed of me. That's your insecurity to carry, not mine. But you know what really gets me?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "You know I care about you. We live together. We've built a life together," she said, her voice starting to crack with emotion. "Yeah?" I leaned back and looked directly at her. "Then name one thing about me that isn't surface level." She froze. I watched her face as she tried to come up with something, anything, that showed she actually knew who I was as a person beyond what I could provide for her. The silence stretched on and on. "Exactly," I said finally. 4 years together and you never really saw me. Just what I could cover for you." She tried again, her voice trembling now. "That's not fair, Tyler. I've been under so much pressure at work. You don't understand what it's like." "We all deal with pressure," I said flatly. "The difference is I never made you feel small just to make myself feel big." She looked desperate now, grasping for anything that might salvage this conversation. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under with these people. They aren't like you. They judge everything. Who you date, what schools you went to, what your parents do for a living." "And I don't measure up?" I asked. "That's not what I'm saying," she replied quickly, but her expression said otherwise. "Look, in that world, appearances matter," she continued, trying to justify herself. "You don't have a college degree. You work in construction for a living. I know it sounds shallow, but these people notice things like that. I own a construction company," I corrected her, my voice still level. "I employ 18 people. I make more money than half those suits you're so worried about impressing." She sighed like I was completely missing the point. "It's not about money, Tyler. It's about fitting in, about being part of their world. You don't understand how it feels to be dating someone without a degree when you're in a room full of MBAs. They'd never take me seriously if they knew." That was it. I'd heard enough. Even when I was trying to address the core issue, she was still disrespecting me, still making excuses for treating me like I was beneath her. 4 years of my life spent with someone who was fundamentally ashamed of who I was, who saw me as something to hide rather than someone to be proud of. Someone who took my money, my time, and my love, but thought I should be grateful just to be in her orbit. "I think we're done here," I said, standing up from the table. "What?" "Tyler, no, please. We can work on this," she said desperately, reaching across the table toward me. "I'll do better. I'll bring you to work events from now on, I promise." "Too late," I said simply. "I'll be by tomorrow with Marcus to get the rest of my stuff. You can keep the apartment until the lease is up in 3 months. I'll pay my half of the rent through then, but after that, you're on your own." "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice small and defeated. "Not your problem anymore." As I walked toward the exit, she called after me one last time. "You're making a huge mistake, Tyler. 4 years together. Are you really throwing away 4 years over one stupid comment? I turned back to look at her one final time. Nah, I'm walking away from being the guy who funded your lifestyle, but wasn't worth acknowledging in public. That's what I'm walking away from. I left her crying in that coffee shop and blocked her number before I even got back to my truck. A week later, I was settling into a small apartment that Marcus's cousin was renting out. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, affordable, and most importantly, it was mine. I started throwing myself into work with renewed energy, hitting the gym more often than I had in years, and reconnecting with friends I'd neglected while I was with Victoria. One afternoon, I was grabbing lunch at this deli near my office when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around to find Sophie standing there with a hesitant smile on her face. "Hey, Tyler," she said, shifting her weight nervously. "I heard what happened between you and Victoria. I just wanted to check if you're doing okay." "I'm getting there," I replied, genuinely surprised to see her. "Want to join me for lunch?" Over sandwiches and coffee, Sophie told me that Victoria had been spinning the story to make me out to be the jealous, controlling boyfriend who couldn't handle her success. But Sophie said she'd known Victoria since they were kids, and this wasn't the first time Victoria had twisted the truth to suit her own narrative and make herself look like the victim. Sophie said she believed I deserved way better than being reduced to someone's driver after 4 years together. When I asked if Victoria had always been like this, so concerned with status and appearances, Sophie nodded sadly. She told me that back in high school, Victoria had actually dropped a close friend because the girl's father lost his job and Victoria was embarrassed by the association. I asked Sophie why she'd stayed friends with someone like that for so long, and she just shrugged. History, I guess. Victoria can be incredibly charming when it serves her purposes, and for someone like me who doesn't make friends easily, that charm kept me around longer than it probably should have. We ended up talking for almost 3 hours. It turned out that Sophie had been on the receiving end of Victoria's superiority complex for years too. Little digs about Sophie's modest teacher salary, comments about how Sophie could do so much better with her appearance if she just tried harder, the way Victoria would use Sophie as a backup plan and then ditch her the moment better options came along. "Remember Victoria's birthday last year?" Sophie asked. "That trip to the beach house?" I nodded. I'd paid for that rental. 3 bedrooms for Victoria, me, and 5 of her friends. "She made me sleep on the couch," Sophie said quietly. "Said the rooms were for couples only, even though I was supposed to share with her single friend Lisa. Then Lisa brought some random guy back to the house and got the room anyway." "Why did you put up with treatment like that?" I asked. Sophie shrugged. "Same reason you did, probably. When you care about someone, you make excuses for their behavior and hope they'll change." Before she left, Sophie handed me a book, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. "It helped me get through some tough times," she explained. "Thought it might help you too." That conversation with Sophie was the first time since the restaurant incident that I felt truly seen and understood. Not as Victoria's boyfriend or just some guy who owns a construction business, but as a real person with genuine feelings and experiences that mattered. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I started texting occasionally. Nothing flirty or romantic, just casual check-ins between two people who were figuring out their lives. Messages like, "How's the new place treating you?" Or, "Did you finish that book I gave you?" Or, "My students asked about the construction trucks they saw today, so I told them about your business." Meanwhile, Victoria was going through what could only be described as a complete meltdown. She alternated between rage and desperate bargaining tactics. She'd create new email addresses to bypass the blocks I'd put in place, sometimes sending messages calling me an asshole for embarrassing her in front of her colleagues, then following up with declarations of undying love in the very next email. When those messages went completely unanswered, she started recruiting mutual friends to plead her case. "She's a total mess, man," my buddy Carlos reported after running into her at a downtown bar. "Crying, drinking too much, saying she made the biggest mistake of her life and doesn't know how to fix it." I stayed firm in my decision. No contact, no exceptions. I packed up the last of my belongings from our old apartment with Marcus's help, left the key on the counter one final time, and officially closed that chapter of my life. About a month after the breakup, Sophie texted me on a Friday evening. "Having a small get-together tomorrow night. Board games and pizza at my place, nothing fancy. Want to come?" I accepted the invitation, figuring it would be good for me to be around people who weren't connected to all the Victoria drama. When I arrived at Sophie's cozy apartment the next evening, I was surprised to find just 5 other people there. 3 couples, all teachers from her school. No big crowd to hide in, no pressure to perform or impress anyone. We played Settlers of Catan, laughed about ridiculous stories from their classrooms, and ate way too much pizza. What struck me most was how normal and comfortable everything felt. Nobody asked about my college degree or made snide comments about my profession. When I mentioned a challenge my crew was facing with a new construction site, they asked thoughtful, genuine questions about the work instead of dismissing it. Around midnight, after the other guests had left, I stayed behind to help Sophie clean up. I thanked her for the invitation, telling her I hadn't realized how much I needed an evening like that. She smiled and said it was nice seeing me laugh again. You seemed so hollow and distant for a while there, like nothing could really reach you anymore. Something about the way she said it made me pause and really look at her. Not as Victoria's friend Sophie, but as her own person. She was wearing simple jeans and a blue sweater that perfectly matched her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Nothing fancy or designed to impress, but she looked genuinely beautiful. What? She asked, noticing my gaze. Nothing, I said, shaking my head, just realizing some things. Like what? Like how sometimes what you really need has been right in front of you the whole time, but you were too distracted to notice. She blushed slightly. Tyler, sorry, I said, backpedaling quickly. That was too much. I should probably head home. She caught my arm gently as I turned toward the door. It wasn't too much, it's just complicated. You're fresh out of a long relationship with my friend. Ex-friend, I corrected. Still, she said softly, I don't want to be your rebound, you know? I nodded, understanding her concern completely. Fair enough. Friends then? Friends, she agreed with a warm smile. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her smile, her laugh, the way she actually listened, really listened, when people talked to her. 2 days later, Sophie mentioned that her car was acting up, making some weird noises and the brakes felt spongy. So I spent Sunday afternoon in her apartment complex parking lot, replacing her brake pads and checking over the rest of her car to make sure everything was safe. When I finished the work, we sat on the curb with cold sodas, just talking about life. She asked me why I'd stayed with Victoria for so long, especially when there were so many obvious red flags. I admitted that it was easier to keep going with what I knew than to face the reality that what we had wasn't actually working. Sophie said something that really stuck with me. You deserve someone who's genuinely proud to be with you, Tyler, not someone who treats you like a secret to be hidden. Something shifted between us in that moment, something we could both feel, but neither of us was ready to put into words yet. After that day, we started spending more time together. Just as friends, we kept telling ourselves, though we both felt the unspoken tension growing stronger every time we hung out. About 3 months after the breakup, I was working late at my office when my receptionist buzzed me. Victoria was there, claiming it was urgent and refusing to leave until she could speak with me. I hadn't seen her since that final conversation at the coffee shop, and I honestly wasn't sure I wanted to break that streak. She walked into my office looking different somehow. She still wore the same designer clothes, but her hair was shorter, her makeup more subdued, and there was an awkward uncertainty in the way she stood in the doorway. Nice office, she said, looking around at the blueprints covering my walls, the industry awards displayed on my shelves. I've never actually been here before, have I? What do you want, Victoria? I asked, not bothering to get up from my desk. She took a deep breath. I've been talking to my therapist about what happened between us, about how I treated you. She's helped me see some things about myself that I didn't want to face. You're in therapy? I couldn't hide my surprise. Started a few weeks ago, after everything fell apart, she said, sitting down in the chair across from my desk. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why I was so ashamed to introduce you to my work friends. Why I lied about all those company events. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My whole life, I've been taught that success means finding a certain kind of man. My mother always said I should find a doctor or a lawyer, someone with the right credentials that she could brag about to her friends. When I brought home a guy who worked at a record store in college, she told me I was selling myself short. I listened with a neutral expression, not giving her any encouragement. When I met you, I was genuinely attracted to your confidence and drive, she continued. You were so different from all the corporate guys I usually dated. But I guess I never fully shook those messages from my childhood, that voice telling me you weren't the right kind of successful. She looked away from me. I know how awful that sounds. It does, I agreed simply. Then she launched into this whole explanation about how she'd compartmentalized her life. Like somehow splitting me off from her career ambitions made everything okay. She said she missed me terribly, that she'd been miserable without me and wanted another chance to make things right. She promised that this time she'd finally introduce me as her boyfriend, that she'd brag about the business I'd built, all the typical too little too late promises. I looked at her, the same woman who had called me her driver in front of her entire executive team, and felt absolutely nothing. Sure, I believe you're sorry, I said, leaning back in my chair. And good luck with the therapy, honestly. But no, we're done. Some things just can't be undone. Her face tightened. Is this about Sophie? I tilted my head slightly. Why would you suddenly care about that? I've seen you two together, she said, her voice getting sharper. At the park, at the mall. Your truck was parked at her place pretty late last week. I just shrugged, and she blinked in disbelief. Did you even wait a month before sleeping with my friend? She asked accusingly. I stood up, staying completely calm. Victoria, what I do now is none of your business. You made that crystal clear when you introduced me as your driver in front of your whole executive team. It's funny how a guy who talks about concrete pours suddenly matters so much to you. Victoria was getting visibly heated now, her composure starting to crack. Sophie's just jealous of me. She's using you to get back at me for something. I actually laughed at that. If anyone's got a legitimate reason to get back at you, it's definitely Sophie. Remember making her sleep on a couch during a trip that I paid for? But here's the thing, she's not like you. She actually sees me, listens to me, and respects me as a person. You had 4 years with me and never managed to do any of those things, I continued. Victoria stood up, practically shaking with anger. This isn't over, Tyler. It's been over for months, I said, walking toward my office door. You just didn't notice because everything's always been about you. She stormed out so violently that one of my framed awards fell off the wall. I didn't even flinch. I just picked up my phone and called Sophie. Victoria just dropped by my office, I told her. Apparently, I'm not allowed to move on with her friend. Are you okay? Sophie asked, concern clear in her voice. Yeah, she's just unraveling. Mind if I come by your place? Dinner's already in the works, she said warmly. And hey, Tyler, just so you know, I've always been proud of you. That right there, that's the difference between someone who sees your worth and someone who doesn't. A month after Victoria's office ambush, I was in the middle of signing the biggest contract of my entire career. A national development company had been courting my business for months, and I'd finally sealed a deal that would literally double the size of my operation overnight. This was the kind of contract I'd been working toward for years, building relationships and proving my company's reliability with smaller projects. When the CEO shook my hand and said, "We're looking forward to a long partnership, Tyler," I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Pure, uncomplicated pride. No one to impress, no one to prove myself to. Just genuine satisfaction in what I'd built with my own hands and determination. Sophie was the first person I called after signing that life-changing deal. That night, she made ribeye steaks, lit candles around her apartment, and put on some smooth jazz music. It was so thoughtful and perfect. Over dessert, she finally admitted something she'd been holding back. I've had feelings for you for a long time, Tyler. Even back when you were with Victoria, but I never would have acted on them. She paused, looking down at her hands. I don't want to just be the friend who helped you through a breakup, you know? I leaned across the small table and kissed her. Not out of desperation or loneliness, but because it felt completely right. When we broke apart, she asked about Victoria, more curious than concerned. I don't give a shit about Victoria anymore, I told her honestly. Sophie nodded and mentioned that they hadn't spoken since the breakup. Her last message to me wasn't even worth replying to, she said. And that was that. We were finally ready to move forward. Sophie stayed over that night and most nights after that. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it might be Victoria trying yet another new number to get around my blocks. But something told me to answer. Tyler, this is Harrison. We met briefly at Sterling's a few months back, the voice said. I was hoping we could meet to discuss a potential business opportunity. Harrison, Victoria's silver-haired boss from that disastrous promotion dinner. What the hell could he possibly want with me? We met for lunch at a steakhouse near his office, and he was refreshingly straightforward about his intentions. Our current construction partner has been consistently late on deadlines, losing materials, and generally becoming a liability, he explained. I remembered you mentioning that you owned a construction company that night at Sterling's. After that interesting dinner, I got curious and looked into your operation. I was genuinely impressed by your track record and client reviews. How did you know it was my company? I asked. He smiled slightly. After that evening, I'll be honest. I got curious about who you really were. Turns out you weren't just some driver after all, but the guy running a respected construction operation. Your reviews and project history speak for themselves. We spent the next hour talking business details, and outlined the basics of what could be a very lucrative ongoing partnership. As we were wrapping up our meeting, Harrison mentioned something that caught my attention. "By the way, Victoria is no longer with our company," he said casually. Her behavior that night at the dinner raised some serious concerns about her judgment and professionalism. I kept my response neutral. "I don't wish her any harm, but I can't say I'm torn up about it either." He nodded approvingly. "I always felt she underestimated you, even in those few minutes we interacted. It was obvious that she didn't recognize your worth." We shook hands, and I left that meeting with a potential new major client and the strange satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the universe delivers its own form of justice. The last I heard about Victoria, she had moved to another city for what she called a fresh start. She tried calling me a few more times before she left town, but I never picked up. I also got one final long email from her, pages and pages about how sorry she was, how she'd made a terrible mistake, how she'd always loved me and regret losing me. I read the first paragraph and deleted the rest without responding. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. She found out about Sophie and me through social media. Sophie had posted a picture of us hiking together, nothing provocative or dramatic, just two happy people enjoying a beautiful day on a mountain trail. Victoria sent one final text message that I actually read. "I guess it all worked out for you two. Hope you're both very happy with yourselves." I blocked that number too and haven't heard from her since. Sophie and I have been together for 10 months now, and she's officially moving in with me next week. Though honestly, most of her stuff is already at my place anyway, so it's more of a formality at this point. Her second grade students drew pictures of construction trucks for her to bring to my office after she told them about my work. Those crayon drawings are hanging in frames on my wall right next to my business license, and they're worth more to me than any fancy college degree could ever be. My company has been expanding rapidly. I've hired 6 more workers and added 4 new trucks to our fleet. I'm seriously looking at opening a second location in the neighboring state to handle all the new contracts we've been landing. Sophie has been amazing through all of this growth, celebrating the wins with me, helping me think through the challenges, and reminding me to take breaks when I'm working too hard and getting tunnel vision. Sometimes I think back to that moment in the restaurant when Victoria called me her driver, and as humiliating as it was at the time, I realize it was also the wake-up call I desperately needed. It forced me to see what had been happening for years, that I was with someone who wasn't just wrong for me, but who was actively ashamed of who I was and what I'd accomplished. If she hadn't been so blatantly disrespectful that night, who knows how many more years I might have wasted in that relationship. How much more money I would have poured into her endless demands for designer clothes and expensive dinners. How many more times I would have swallowed my pride when she made those subtle digs at my career or education. Sometimes the universe has to kick you in the teeth to wake you up to what's really going on. Most guys reading this probably know exactly what I'm talking about. That persistent gut feeling when something's off in your relationship, but you can't quite name what it is. The subtle digs that leave you feeling like you're somehow not enough, no matter what you accomplish. The constant need to prove your worth to someone who should already see it. If you're experiencing that kind of treatment, my advice is simple. Get out. Life's too short to be with someone who makes you feel small or ashamed of who you are. Sometimes the best revenge isn't some elaborate scheme to get back at someone who wronged you. It's just living well, being successful, and finding someone who's genuinely proud to stand beside you. Someone who introduces you as her boyfriend, not her fucking driver. And that's exactly what I found with Sophie. She sees me for who I really am, appreciates the work I do, and never makes me feel like I need to apologize for my background or my success. When we go out together, she talks about my business with genuine pride and interest. When her teacher friends ask about my work, she lights up explaining what I do instead of changing the subject. That's what a real relationship looks like. 2 people who lift each other up instead of one person hiding the other like a dirty secret. I'm happier now than I've been in years, and every day I'm more grateful that Victoria showed her true colors that night at Sterling's. Because if she hadn't, I might never have realized what I was missing, and I definitely wouldn't have found my way to Sophie. So Reddit, what do you think? Did I handle this situation the right way, or should I have done something differently? Have any of you been in similar situations where a partner was ashamed of your background or career?